This happened a few years ago while I was driving home from my brother's wedding. The reception was held outside a small town in western Pennsylvania. I lived several hours away, and I had originally planned to stay at a hotel that night. By the time the reception ended, though, I still felt awake enough to make the drive. It was a decision I regretted before I was halfway home. The fastest route took me through a long stretch of farmland and wooded back roads. I knew the area well enough that I wasn't worried about getting lost. I had driven through there during the day plenty of times. At night it felt like a completely different place. Nothing looked familiar anymore. It was sometime after 1 in the morning when I saw an old tan car parked on the shoulder ahead of me, facing the same direction I was traveling. It looked like a sedan from the late 70s or early 80s. The paint was faded, and the back end sat slightly lower on the gravel shoulder. Its lights were off. A woman stood several feet in front of it near the edge of the road. She was wearing a white dress. At first I thought there had been an accident. She stood with one arm raised as I approached. She didn't wave it back and forth. She just held it there. I slowed down. The dress came down below her knees. The bottom was dirty and she wasn't wearing shoes. Her hair hung over one side of her face. I remember thinking that she might have been coming home from a wedding or some other formal event when her car broke down. Because I had just left a wedding myself, that was where my mind went. There was no one else around. I passed her at around 20 miles per hour. As my headlights moved across the car, I noticed that the hood was closed. None of the tires appeared to be flat. The woman turned her head and watched me go by. I didn't stop immediately. I drove another few hundred feet before pulling onto the shoulder. I sat there with the engine running and looked in the rearview mirror. The road behind me was dark, but I could still make out the pale shape of her dress. She hadn't moved. I considered leaving. When I checked my phone again, there were still no bars and the map still hadn't updated. If she really needed help, I might have been the only person who came through for a long time. I put the car in reverse and slowly backed down the shoulder. I stopped about 15 feet in front of the tan car. That gave me enough room to leave quickly while still allowing her to speak through my passenger window. The woman walked toward me. I kept the doors locked and lowered the passenger window only a few inches. I asked if she was all right. She leaned down toward the opening and explained that her car had stopped. Up close, she looked younger than I had expected, maybe in her late 20s. There was dirt along one side of her face, and her eyes looked red. Her voice was surprisingly calm. I offered to keep driving until I found service, then call the police and give them her location. She looked back toward the tan car and asked me not to leave her there. I offered her a ride instead, but she didn't answer. She looked past me through the windshield, then raised her head and glanced over the roof of my car, toward the road behind us. It was quick, but I noticed it. I asked if anyone was with her, or if she had been in an accident. She said no to both. According to her, the car had simply stopped, though she couldn't explain what had gone wrong. She then tried to persuade me to get out and look at it. I told her I didn't know enough about cars to diagnose anything, but she insisted that I could at least try. When I still wouldn't get out, she walked back toward the sedan and suggested that it might be the battery. I asked whether the engine had made any noise when she tried restarting it. She stopped walking. After a moment, she admitted that she didn't know. That answer bothered me. I asked if she had even tried starting it again. For a second, she just stood there. When she turned back toward me, the frightened look had disappeared. She seemed irritated, almost like I had asked a question she hadn't prepared for. Then her expression softened again, and she said she didn't know what else to do. She opened the driver's door and leaned inside. The dome light came on, but from where I was sitting I couldn't see much more than the glow through the windshield. What bothered me was that she didn't appear to be checking anything. She didn't try to start the car. She didn't open the hood. She leaned inside for only a few seconds before standing upright again. Then she looked down the road behind us. It was the second time I had seen her do that. When she returned to my car, she became more insistent that I come back with her and inspect the sedan. I repeated that I wouldn't know what to look for. Her voice changed. She no longer sounded frightened. She sounded impatient. I tightened my hands around the steering wheel and told her I was going to drive until I found service, then send the police to her exact location. She stared through the passenger window and told me not to leave. I tried calling 911 anyway. The phone attempted to connect for several seconds before the call failed. She watched me put it back into the cup holder. Then she reminded me that there was no service. There was no panic in her voice. She sounded almost satisfied. I put the car in drive. Before I could pull away, headlights appeared in my rearview mirror. They were far behind the tan car at first, coming around a bend. The woman saw them too. She looked down the road, but she didn't step away from the shoulder or try to flag the vehicle down. She just watched it approach. From the height of the headlights, I could tell it was a pickup truck. The truck began slowing before it reached us. That was when the woman turned toward me again. The frightened expression was completely gone. She moved closer to my passenger door and pointed toward the ground, claiming that something was leaking from beneath my car. I didn't look. The pickup stopped in the travel lane behind the sedan. Its headlights lit the back of the car and reflected harshly in my mirrors. The woman grabbed my passenger door handle. When it didn't open, she pulled it again and demanded that I unlock it. I looked in my rearview mirror. The driver's door of the pickup opened. A man stepped out. I couldn't see his face because the headlights were behind him. I could only make out his outline as he walked past the sedan on the shoulder and started moving toward the driver's side of my car. The woman pulled harder on the handle, then struck the passenger window with the side of her fist. She was no longer pretending to need help. She was trying to get inside. My tires slipped against the gravel before catching. The woman jumped away as my car shot forward along the shoulder. I steered back onto the pavement and accelerated. The road ahead was completely open. That was the one advantage I still had. In my mirror, I saw the man stop and turn back toward the pickup. For several seconds, all I could see behind me was darkness. Then the truck's headlights reappeared. It had passed the tan car and was coming after me. The headlights quickly grew larger in my mirror. I pressed harder on the gas. The pickup stayed close enough that I thought it might hit me, but it never tried to pass. It just followed with its headlights shining into the back of my car. The road curved between the hills, making it impossible to see very far ahead. I knew there were no towns nearby, and my phone still had no service. I kept expecting the truck to pull alongside me. It never did. After less than a mile, the headlights began to fall back. A few seconds later, they disappeared behind a bend. I continued watching the mirror, expecting them to return. They never did. I didn't slow down. My phone sat in the cup holder with the screen still lit. For several minutes, it continued to show no service. Then one bar appeared. I called 911 and told the dispatcher what had happened. She told me to keep driving until I reached a well-lit area or saw an officer. About 15 minutes later, a state trooper met me at a closed service station, while another patrol car continued toward the place where I had seen the woman. I described the tan sedan, the pickup, and the woman in the white dress. I hadn't seen either plate. By the time officers reached the area, both vehicles were gone. All they found were fresh tire marks on the shoulder. The trooper told me there had been a similar report from the same area several weeks earlier. A driver had stopped for what appeared to be a disabled vehicle. Once he got out to help, two men approached and robbed him. The trooper couldn't say whether the incidents were connected, but he said the setup sounded familiar. He asked why I had stopped. I told him she was standing alone on the side of the road, miles from anywhere. At the time, leaving her there felt worse than stopping. I still think about how close I came to getting out of my car. If I had walked back to the sedan, I would have been trapped between the two vehicles when the pickup arrived. I doubt I would have made it back to my car before that man reached me. What stays with me most is that I stopped because I thought someone needed help. Now, whenever I see someone stranded on the side of the road, I can't help wondering which one of us is actually in danger. I was 23 at the time and still living with my parents in a rural town surrounded by farmland and woods. I worked evenings at a warehouse about 40 minutes away. Most nights I took the highway home. but there was a back road that cut almost 10 minutes off the drive. It passed through a long stretch of forest before reconnecting with the county road near my house. During the day it was a nice drive. At night there was almost nothing out there. There were a few houses near the beginning of the road, but after that you could drive for miles without seeing anything. Cell service dropped out about halfway through, and there were no gas stations until you reached the next town. I had driven it enough times that it never bothered me. One night, someone on the overnight shift called out, and I agreed to stay late. By the time I clocked out, it was after midnight. It had rained earlier that day, and parts of the road were still wet. I had the radio turned down low because I was watching for deer. They were common in that area, especially at night, and I had almost hit one a few years earlier. Once I passed the last farmhouse, the road narrowed. The trees grew close to the shoulder on both sides. In some places, the branches reached over the pavement and met above the car. I was driving around 35 miles per hour when I noticed movement in the woods to my right. I couldn't make out what it was. It looked like something passing between the trees. I assumed it was a deer, so I took my foot off the accelerator and watched the shoulder. Nothing came out. I continued driving. A few seconds later, I heard a soft, uneven sound near the passenger side of the car. It came in short bursts, almost like a loose strip of rubber hitting the pavement. I thought something might have become caught underneath the car, so I turned off the radio and listened. The sound stopped. I drove another 100 feet before it started again. This time it was faster. It no longer sounded like something dragging beneath the car. It sounded like something running beside me. I looked in the passenger side mirror. Whatever it was, it moved along the edge of the road behind me. At first I thought it was a big deer. Then the sound grew louder. Within seconds it had pulled even with the rear passenger door. I looked at the speedometer. I was still doing 35. Whatever it was keeping pace with the car. I pressed harder on the accelerator. The speedometer reached 40, then 45. It stayed beside me. I could hear it striking the pavement just outside the passenger door. I kept my eyes forward and tried not to look at it. For several seconds the sound remained beside the car. Then it stopped. I checked the mirrors. There was nothing there. I slowly exhaled, thinking it was gone. Then I looked toward the passenger seat. Its head rose beside the window. It happened so quickly that I nearly drove off the road. 1 second, the glass was black. The next, something was looking in. I didn't see enough to describe it clearly. I remember its eyes looking much too large and its skin appearing almost colorless against the glass. I couldn't tell whether it had hair. What I remember most was how close it was. There was only the passenger side window between us. I jerked the steering wheel to the left. The tires crossed the center line before I corrected. When I looked back toward the passenger window, the figure had dropped behind the car again. The road curved ahead. I knew there was a narrow bridge around the bend. Concrete barriers ran along both sides, leaving almost no shoulder. I should have slowed down. Instead, I kept accelerating. The figure moved closer again. I saw part of its back rise near the bottom of the passenger window. Whatever it was much larger than I had first thought. The bridge appeared in my headlights. I hit the brakes just enough to make the turn. As soon as I entered the bridge, whatever had been running beside me disappeared. The concrete barrier had cut it off. I looked in the rearview mirror. For a moment, the road behind me was empty. Then a shape moved into the faint red glow behind the car. It was standing at the entrance to the bridge. Its body was raised higher off the ground than it had been while running, but it still wasn't standing like a person. It remained there as I drove away. I made it across the bridge and pushed the accelerator again. The road twisted through the trees, and I knew I was driving too fast. I also knew that if I lost control, no one would find me until morning. I kept checking the mirrors. The figure wasn't behind me. After about a mile, I started to believe it had stopped at the bridge. Then I saw something pale move between the trees to my right. A few seconds later, it appeared again farther ahead. The woods were too thick for a person to move through quickly, but whatever was out there was still keeping pace with me. Then, without warning, it disappeared. I didn't reduce my speed until I reached the first house outside the woods. A porch light was on, and an older pickup was parked in the driveway. I thought about pulling in and knocking on the door. I didn't. I had no idea what I would say. My phone regained service a few minutes later. I called my dad and woke him up. I told him I had seen a large animal and asked him to wait outside for me. I didn't describe the rest over the phone. When I pulled into the driveway, my dad was standing near the garage. Before getting out, I locked the doors and sat there looking toward the tree line behind our house. My dad walked over and asked what was wrong. I told him something had followed my car. He checked the passenger side and looked underneath it, but there was no damage and nothing caught near the tires. When he asked what kind of animal it was, I told him I didn't know. The next morning, my dad suggested that it might have been a deer running at a strange angle. Later, he mentioned a large dog or possibly a bear with mange. I wanted one of those explanations to make sense, but I had seen deer run beside vehicles before. This was larger, and it had stayed beside my car even after I accelerated. For the next few weeks, I took the highway home. When I finally returned to the back road during the day, I stopped near the bridge. There was no trail running alongside it. The brush beyond the concrete barrier was almost chest high. I still don't know how anything could have moved through it that quickly. People have asked whether I think it was a skinwalker or something supernatural. I really don't know what to call it. For years, I tried to explain it away. What still bothers me is that when its face appeared beside my window, it wasn't looking ahead. It was looking right at me. This happened when I was younger, back when a group of us used to explore abandoned places for fun. Most of the houses we found were already in bad shape. Broken windows, damaged walls, furniture left behind. After a while, they all started to feel the same. But there was one house that was different. From the outside, it looked like it had been abandoned for years. Black mold had spread across the siding. The porch was sagging, and the whole place had that sunken look old houses get after no one has taken care of them for a long time. We expected the inside to be even worse. It wasn't. The moment we walked in, the house didn't match the outside. The beds were still made, the sheets were tucked in, and the pillows were still arranged like someone had done it that morning. We opened a couple of dresser drawers and found clothes folded neatly inside. Nothing looked packed up or searched through. Family pictures were still hanging on the walls. That was when the whole thing started to feel wrong. It didn't feel like we were exploring an abandoned house in the middle of nowhere anymore. It felt like we had broken into someone's home while they were away, and they could come back at any moment. We started talking about how none of it made sense. The outside looked like nobody had been there in years, but inside it looked like the family had just left everything behind. There was an old refrigerator in the kitchen. One of my friends reached for the handle, but someone told him not to open it. He laughed, but he left it alone. We left soon after that. The house was all we talked about on the drive home. None of us could come up with a good explanation for why everything had been left behind like that. Over the next few weeks, we kept bringing it up. Eventually, someone suggested going back at night. I think we wanted to figure out what was going on with the place. So a few weeks later, we went back. We got there sometime after 1 in the morning and parked near the house. After standing outside for a minute, we finally went back inside. Nothing seemed to have changed, but being there at night made the place feel even more unsettling. We had only been inside for a minute or two when light suddenly came through the cracks in the window shutters. One of us looked outside and saw headlights coming slowly down the long drive toward the house. We shut off our flashlights and watched the lights get closer. For a few seconds, none of us knew what to do. Then someone said we needed to leave. We ran out through the side door to get back to the car. There was a big pickup truck coming straight at us with its high beams on, so we couldn't see who was driving. The truck pulled up beside our car and abruptly stopped just as we got in. We immediately sped off. The truck followed us. At first we thought the driver was just trying to scare us off the property, but he kept following us long after we left. For nearly half an hour, The truck stayed right behind us through that whole stretch of empty road. The high beams filled every mirror in the car, and whenever we sped up, the truck sped up with us. There were no other cars around. Then, without warning, the headlights shut off. For a moment, we thought the truck had stopped or turned around. A few seconds later, we were barely able to make out that it was behind us. It was still following us with the headlights off. That was when we really started to panic. We kept driving until we reached the main road. As soon as we pulled onto it, the truck was gone. We never saw who was driving, and we never went back to that house. I still don't know what happened to the family who lived there, or whether the person in that truck had anything to do with the property. All I know is that we were not supposed to be there,